let's just do a little bit. I mean, yeah.
All right.
I don't want to be spoilery on it. But I do think that the second episode is when everything opens up. So.
Right. So let's just do that. Let's jump right in. Hi everyone. Mark and Ryan are back. We want to talk about Scream 6.
Yeah.
But first, because last week the big thing that happened is The Mandalorian season 3 started. And tomorrow's episode 2 drops, but we've already seen it.
Yeah.
So we both liked The Mando.
Yeah. Really
leading up to now. Just getting to this. Again, and The Mandalorian was the best part of the Book of Boba Fett. So everyone, if you've seen episode 1 of season 3, then you know we get back in the swing of things. You know, Grogu is back. We're tooling around the galaxy, and the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, is trying to reclaim his stature as a Mandalorian because the armorer said he is no longer one.
Yeah, he's got to go bathe in the waters.
Bathe in the sacred waters beneath the mines of Mandalore. Mandalore that was destroyed and poisoned, according to everyone, up to and including Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan Kryze. So he has to go and do that, but he has to find his way there. He needs to scout. Episode 1 is the IG-80 or IG-11 stuff.
Yeah.
Which I just thought was hysterical because I had forgotten how much he hates droids.
Yes.
Yes. But he trusts that droid.
And we'll go to almost no end to have that droid. The first episode kind of served as a reintroduction to a lot of the characters that had populated the universe. But the second episode, to me, it's radically different in that A, it's about twice as long. B, it's not about reintroducing characters. It's about jumping into what I presume the bulk of this season is going to be about. As we're not going to get into spoilers too much here, but it definitely it's a story that feels more grounded in what is about to happen rather than kind of looking back and reintroducing.
Yeah, and the lore. Well, it is kind of looking back, but it's looking back at the lore of Mandalore.
Sure. But I mean, it's in the present moment.
Yes.
Yes. There's definitely the Star Warsian religious stuff that's in there about the Mandalorians, and I mean, there's a lot of Star Wars stuff that takes place. But to me, it's a much the scale gets much bigger in this. It's not just about a small outpost town or something kind of happening at the edge of the universe. It's kind of puts the narrative in a more epic, big place.
But the story is still intimate. But you're right. But the setting is very, very epic. It's very open. I mean, because it does affect the that galaxy far, far away. Because it's like key bits of history. But the story is still Din Djarin trying to find he's still trying to find his place. Even after 2 seasons and all the time that he spent as a Mandalorian before that.
Sure. But I would also say that also goes for Grogu, who, obviously doesn't have much to say, but, Grogu has spent a couple years away training. But still doesn't seem to really have a grasp on who he is either.
Yeah. Well, and let's not forget something, right? Grogu is like 50, and he has memories of Order 66 at the Jedi Temple.
Yeah.
So Luke wasn't his first exposure to Force training, but how much did he actually have, and really how much at some point if he's 50 now and Yoda was 900, at some point Grogu's going to start speaking complete sentences, and that's going to change the dynamic between him and Mando.
Yeah, it's just a question of when is that going to happen, and is that
Well, it's going to happen at a
does
really dramatic time.
probably,
That's
but
when that's going to happen. So like I said, let's not forget we
yeah.
still call him Baby Yoda, but he is
He's
far from a baby. And he is just inherently strong with the Force.
yeah,
So there is that.
but he's still figuring it out.
But he's still figuring it out. Episode 2, we won't get into spoilers. We do get our first glimpse of Mandalore, the
And
planet.
it's and yeah, there's a couple shots there that are just I don't know, beautiful's the right word. Beautiful's probably exactly the wrong word, but they again, it's the scope of things.
Yeah. Well, what was
And
it? Was it Buzz Aldrin on the moon said it called it Magnificent Desolation?
yes,
And it said that's kind of applicable to
very much so.
Mandalore. Mandalore is technically a blasted out shitbox
Yeah,
because it was blasted out of existence. But it's like a crystalline surface now. As we saw in episode 1 with the relic. It's an interesting landscape that he has to navigate. Also interesting is seeing where Bo-Katan lives.
yes,
Where does the Princess of Mandalore live? It's not on Mandalore anymore. It's on one of the moons, I believe, or one of the other planets in the system. But she's got some sweet digs.
yeah, and I mean, and we're looking at a lot of themes of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and people being unable to address that trauma, and that's I obviously that's a little heavy, but this episode is a little heavy in that regard, and and I think it's everybody's trying to figure out how they fit into the landscape of whatever is going on that at that moment. I don't really feel like I have a sense of the universe on a galactic level, but
Right.
it feels like we're edging closer to where that becomes part of the story. Um,
Yeah. And Bo-Katan had thought she knew her place, and she doesn't anymore
no,
because her
no,
circumstances have changed
radically.
radically. So yes, she's the Princess of Mandalore, but yeah. So episode 2, no more spoilers. A
No,
couple of big things happen.
well, and I'm probably the only person that's going to keep going on and on about this, but there was a robot monster in
No,
this
you're right.
episode that I love this robot monster so much. Um, there's so much to be excited about in the episode that I almost feel like, why am I talking about this, somewhat minor character that they have in there? But I just love it's a very Star Wars primitive, advanced technology sort of thing. Um, I don't. It to me, the best reference point is it feels like something out of the City of Lost Children.
Ooh,
I love the monster.
good
Uh,
reference.
so I mean, I love
But
this
there's also,
monster.
but again, we talked about this, and I don't want to say what I
Yeah,
told you, but
yeah, yeah.
there's a clear influence of the prequel trilogies, and
Sure.
you'll know it when you see it. I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, but I've definitely got the vibe,
But
design and
yeah,
movement
sure,
wise.
sure. Technology and whatnot, and some of the yeah. But I just love the monster that's in this one, and it probably will not end up being made a toy, or because I don't know how they'd pull it off.
I don't either, but it would
Uh,
be awesome.
it would be an awesome toy if they could that
It'd be a
anyway.
It'd be a Lego Technics build.
It could be
I think
absolutely.
is the way that would go. And then of course there's the the big
Yes,
reveal at
yes,
the end of
yes.
the episode that changes
Yeah,
a lot of perception in at least one
yes,
character's mind
yes.
about things and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I want to see like the first words that are said in episode 3 next week.
Well,
I I want
yeah,
to see that
and
reaction.
I don't know if that character is particularly ready to talk about it. Like it wouldn't surprise me if they don't. Like if they just kind of, well, I'm not going to acknowledge what just happened. But
Nope.
no, but we're off to a start here, and I mean, it's too early for me to say where it ranks quality-wise and whatnot, but I do like the fact that it does, where that first episode felt pretty familiar, the second one does not.
Yeah. It definitely opens it up, and that's a good thing. Not that I didn't love the, bad guy of the week format of the first couple seasons there, but because it's cool, because then you're into the Western. But now, the man with no name, if you will, is kind of learning where he comes from or what influences that. So yeah, definitely cool. And we do learn more about his background because he's talking to Grogu.
Yeah.
As they're flying around, and we learn a lot that way. So that's cool.
He's teaching Grogu. Like
yes.
he's being look, hey kid, if you've decided you're going to be with me, I better show you the ropes.
Yep.
And sure, you don't know how to talk, and I don't know what you're getting out of this, but let's just go through. Let's give you some crash courses in bounty hunting and what we're doing and whatnot.
Yep. So that's that. Yeah, I'm excited for episode 3 next week, which hopefully they let us watch early again. That would be great. Let's talk about this week's big release. Well, one of this week's big releases, I think. There's 2 this week?
Well, well, there's this.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't call it big. Well, I don't know.
This one is big. The other one is Champions, which I have not watched yet.
Yeah.
But also opens this week. So, but let's talk about Scream 6. You are a horror guy.
I am
generally.
But I do want to say that when the original Scream trilogy came out in the 90s to 2000 era, I was kind of into I was exploring Hong Kong cinema and a lot of older foreign stuff. And so I didn't really jump on that whole horror era bandwagon that was right then.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see the Scream trilogy probably until a couple of years after it had, come out.
Right.
That said, it was clear to me why it was a thing.
Yeah.
And I loved the, being someone who had watched a lot of horror films that are referenced or, talked about in these films, and a lot of the conversations that they kind of sort of make fun of, but it's done in a loving way.
Yeah.
That was definitely fun. For me as someone who kind of got what they were riffing on.
Yeah.
And it allowed the franchise to be formulaic and still feel kind of fresh in a way that a lot of films that do something similar have not been able to, stay fresh and feel new. That doesn't mean that there hasn't been, decent movies built on old parts that recycled old parts. But Scream was readily apparent to me why Scream was a thing.
Yeah.
And why it also appealed to audiences who weren't necessarily having those conversations, but had, they had ideas about what horror films were.
Mm.
And it's just kind of neat because it's almost like a history lesson for those who don't know anything.
Right.
And kind of like it's not necessarily a recap, but like, hey, remember that time we talked about such and such over the high school dinner or cafeteria table and whatever, and we were talking anyway. It was conversations that a lot of had and didn't realize that there were more than 5 of us who were having in the world.
Yeah,
I guess.
And I wasn't. I mean, I watched horror. I as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate horror more as a genre. You know what I mean? I understand. Well, I understood why the Scream movies were a thing. The first few, they always fancy themselves as smart humor or smart horror, I should say.
Yeah, not elevated, which is they kind of joked about in the last one, which I thought. I mean that 2002's kind of whatever they wanted to call it, quasi reboot, and which they address.
Yes, the requel or whatever.
Yeah, and they were addressing that film and this film. But I thought that it captured the spirit and the updated those conversations because it introduced the idea of elevated horror and whatnot, and Scream kind of fits in between this whole. And I don't know that elevated horror is a real thing,
Right.
but whatever that concept of more high art horror versus no budget
general splatter.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's well above general splatter horror.
So I like last year's film a lot. Even though was it particularly original? No, but that wasn't exactly what Scream was about. In fact, that's kind of not what Scream was about. But it was more about that kind of the humor of the repetition of, we go into these movies and we know exactly what we want.
Yep.
And the movie knows exactly what it's going to give us, and we usually can predict certain things. And so it's up to that movie to throw out the strangest twist that it possibly can.
Everything's bitter, everything's bigger, everything's bloodier.
Yes.
Everything.
They talk about that in this film. But I thought the last film had recaptured a lot of that magic of the original films. And it's not that the fourth or fifth or the fourth film was awful. It just didn't feel like it was in the right place at the right time, sort of thing.
Right.
Whereas I think Halloween, the remake sequel, kind of primed. Well, it wasn't. I don't know if it was even Halloween, but there was a horror renaissance.
Yeah.
But I think that we're still sort of in, and we might still be in. We'll have to see how it plays out. But there was a lot of attention being given to horror films over the last few years, and so a Scream film felt like it really fit into what was going on in the vast cinematic landscape of things.
Yeah, what I gotta figure out which. Oh, it's there's ones that are coming that I don't want. There we go. So yeah, so let's real quick in this is May. The Overlook Film Festival, end of March, beginning of April. It's a horror festival. Two of the big titles are Renfield is going to be there with Nick Cage, and Evil Dead Rise. Now that's a spin off of a classic IP in Dracula.
Yes.
And it is what looks to be a pretty promising continuation of the Evil Dead universe. That's a nice set of movies that are coming out this year.
Well,
horror wise.
And again, that speaks to where we are. I think for years Evil Dead was not a property anyone wanted to touch. It just wasn't. You can't make money with that, Yeah, exactly. But I think yes, I think we're actually in an environment now where it seems about right for a new Evil Dead. I really liked the last film, and the TV series was interesting, if not always high quality. But now it feels like this feels like let's get that element back into the public. I mean, we had a Hellraiser remake, which
wasn't terrible.
Wasn't terrible, but the thing that I would say about that is it completely missed the spirit and the purpose of the original, and I think that's problematic.
Which we did talk about that in some detail in our discussion of that. Again, not a bad film, but
no, but it misses the point. Whereas in this case, this last year's Scream knew exactly what the point was, and really nailed it down. And so I think I was really excited going into this. I like the characters, and the cast has proven to be formidable. Really, they've gone on to bigger and better things than they were even last year. So I was really looking forward to this. It shifts to New York City.
Mm-hmm.
This is taking place over what I guess I would call Halloween weekend.
Yeah.
Because there's the first night isn't Halloween, but there are Halloween parties.
Yep.
They're going on. And so you get pretty much an entire New York City dressed up in costumes, which isn't realistic, but it's a nice fantasy, so we'll just go with it. I mean, why not?
Right.
I would kind of enjoy living in a city where literally everybody dressed up. But so it's we're in a new place, and it starts off like many Scream stories does, with a wonderful sort of cameo, 15 minutes of fame, and then that character's life is put out with a knife.
And then they throw a twist right on that, and you're like, well, that can't be how this is going to go.
Well, it's the first red herring.
Right. Of many.
Yeah, well, and it's even before we're really reconnected with what the main story or the story, of this film is. We don't, with the Carpenter sisters, they don't even appear in the beginning.
No, I don't think they're probably not in the first 15 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's unusual, but Scream can do that because it's established that sort of thing. Which is referenced. It's a nod towards Psycho and things, but but there is that moment of, oh my gosh, okay, so this is going to go in a different direction, and for a couple minutes, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to go in another different direction.
Yep.
And that's kind of where the film is constantly throwing red herrings. There's just a ton.
And then of course we get to every Scream has its expository segment where the rules are laid out.
Yeah, well, and they actually there's a scene with psychologist that's early on that actually recaps the last Scream as well. So if you didn't see Scream, just listen to the psychologies, the moment where everything is basically recapped.
Yeah, but so then when we get our rules, what I love the fact is that basically what the rules come down to is, what is it? It's not a sequel, it's not a requel, it's not a reboot. Now it's a franchise.
Yes.
Which again, I just thought that was hilarious that is now what we've defined it as. Now we're in a franchise. But basically what that means is that everyone is a suspect, everyone is a target, and you literally can't trust anyone. Nobody is safe and no one is innocent.
Yeah, because it's gone above whatever,
Oh yes, and legacy characters are not safe.
No.
Legacy characters are not safe. Now we have 4 legacy characters in here from the survivors of the last film.
Well, and then we have a couple more as well.
Well, we do, but
primarily there's 4 from the last film.
Gail Weathers.
And Gail and one other. That's maybe a little bit of surprise unless you look at the cast from the 4th film.
Yeah.
And of course, we're introduced to a host of new characters, which are pointed out quite quickly as fresh meat.
Yep.
Because obviously they are.
And everyone in turn is identified as the probable killer, and almost immediately we're shown that they can't be the killer. Everyone in the film is explained why they're the killer. And then that is immediately debunked by something that happens. Happens in every movie.
Well, yes, but as in all Scream movies, they have a moment where they recap the film, the real events that inspired the stab movies, and point out who did what, and I don't know. They're using some groundwork here. So really, some of the traditional, like, that person can't be in 2 places at once. Scream has thrown that out of really the conversation by doing certain things over time.
Yep.
So that in a way you can have somebody in 2 places at once. And so a lot of that kind of goes into play in this as well.
But hey, look, if you enjoy what you're seeing and hearing on the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast, why not take a second to click subscribe if you're on YouTube, click follow wherever you're listening to us. Follow us on Twitter at VS Movie Podcast. Same over on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, it's Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. That would be awesome for us. We appreciate you listening. And now let's get back to the show. Yeah, so the film, just like most of them, it's a series of red herrings. Honestly, about halfway through the film, I hit on the way that I want to classify all of the Scream films as whodunits in the vein of Agatha Christie or Benoit Blanc, but with more blood. They're literally, if you watch them, if you take the mass amounts of blood out, they're really just classic whodunits.
To a great extent, because it's, but I think that also, I don't know that the Scream films are very honest with the audience. There's a couple shots in this one where I'm like, take that out,
Subway.
The Subway I think is a lot of fun. But it almost feels like a distraction. So there's a scene on the subway where everyone, again, of course, is all dressed up in costumes. It's Halloween, and so we get a Easter egg fest of horror villains and horror characters in the subway. But it almost feels like, am I supposed to be pausing this? Am I supposed to be like, oh, I know who that guy is. And at that point, have I forgotten that I'm also watching a movie and this is supposed to be kind of an important scene?
It does ratchet up the tension very well.
Yeah, but no, there's just a couple quick cuts here and there that it's like, I know why you put that in there, and it's because you want that to be misleading.
Yeah.
And I think that it doesn't need to necessarily go that far because it's misleading enough. You don't need to sneak additional misleading stuff in there, but the violence, this film is just vicious.
It is.
It's even, I mean, from the very get-go, there is a ruthless nature to it. Not that the other films are necessarily playful in their violence aspect, but this one, it doesn't have that humor aspect as frequently. It's there occasionally, but this feels almost not like a Scream film, in the way that the humor is toned down and the violence just feels ratcheted up.
Yeah, and but you know what though? You could almost argue it by the time you get to the reveal and the motivation, that almost explains it.
Yeah, but I
or justifies it. I won't say explains it, but it almost justifies it.
I guess at this point, I should reveal, I don't know that I really like this movie. I don't know that I don't think it feels as disappointing as the recent Halloween sequels. Anyway, but it feels like the last one nailed what a Scream movie is, and this one wasn't sure if it wanted to be a Scream movie or not.
Yeah.
Or if it wants, I think it's doing everything it can to not have sequel fatigue. But at the same time, a lot of the choices that they've made in this, it's like, yeah, you know what? You've run that element of this franchise into the ground. Maybe we need more of a step away than you're doing. Or, and I will also say there's a certain swagger to the film at the end that you go, okay, well, maybe this is a transitional film, and the way it ends and where the characters are at that point, maybe, because they're going to, sequels are always up and, is it going to happen? Yeah. And they're always in the works, or depending on how successful the film goes. And this just feels like, they set up something that is different. Not necessarily radically different, but I don't know. Like I said, there's a swagger that comes in at the very end.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better about the film than the film itself. does. If I
Yeah.
guess, I guess it's a franchise now, so it makes me feel better about the franchise than the film itself does.
Yeah, let's okay, so weirdly the same guys wrote the last movie,
Yeah.
and the same guys directed it as
Yeah.
directed the last movie. So it's weird that they would have two different feels, sort of.
Yeah, it is, and I don't know how much the script changed based on contracts and casting and things.
Yes, because of that glaring hole in
Which
the center of this
which
donut.
they do address the absence of certain Sydney.
But it's perfunctory.
It's very like, really, that's how you're
That's
gonna
all they
go
got.
about it. Okay, all right. Well, you addressed it. Let's move
I
on.
am happy to report, if anyone cares to dig to justify this, I made a flippant remark on Twitter last summer about this when that contract thing popped up, and going into watching it last night, I didn't know if I wanted to be right or wrong about my flippant remark, but I was wrong. So I don't know if I'm happy
Yeah.
about that or not. So
Yeah.
so I don't know. But so yeah, so Sydney is not in it. We don't get Sydney. I would like to point, but like I said, we do. Sam and Tara are back.
It's not void of, they are clearly, the franchise needs to shift.
Yeah.
Its main characters. There's only so many times, um, a particular person can be put into a situation.
Right.
And yes, it's a horror film, and all the rules are tossed out anyway, and it's not supposed to be overly realistic. But I
Right.
think just from a narrative structure, it can't always be about, you know, this is even different than Halloween, because
Yeah.
this is, I mean, just the Ghostface killer aspect of who that is, or who they are, if you want to go into that. It takes away some of the personal element that
Yeah.
exists,
Because that
in
keeps shifting.
Halloween, or I mean, so it's a different dynamic anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
so
Jason Voorhees is always Jason Voorhees. Michael Myers is always Michael Myers.
yes,
Ghostface
is never.
right, exactly. So that's the difference. I want to mention this before we get too far. The other two of the core four,
Yeah,
as they reluctantly call themselves,
the
obviously
brother and sister. Yeah,
brother and sister, the Meeks Martin kids. Mason Gooding is Chad, and Mindy is played by Jasmine Savoy-Brown, who a couple of years ago made a movie called Sound of Violence, and I
yeah.
fell in love with her in that. So if you like Mindy as a character, if you like that actress, go find Sound of Violence. It's really awesome. It's another horror movie, but it's almost a thriller, but it's really good. And she's really good in it. So that's my quick tangent on the cast. But yeah, so we get another legacy character. We have these four. Ghostface is, and that's the whodunit that you're trying to figure out. And no matter who you guess, you will be right and wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the way the franchise has kind of gone
yeah,
more often than it's almost a caveat.
yeah,
And I think it hasn't ever really bothered me, because that was just kind of its thing.
mhm.
But I just don't know. The big reveal in this one might be my least favorite part of the film.
Yeah.
That
I wasn't. I felt it was a stretch.
Well, and to me the tone kind of shifts. Like it's almost like, oh wait, we have to go back to kind of referencing ourselves, and
Yeah,
a lot of things, and at that point it just feels out of place, because it hasn't been that movie. There's been one or two scenes that were like that, but a lot of it's not. I don't know. It's just it's I don't, it's just a kind of an uneven, strange shifting of tone, and it's not horrible by any stretch of the imagination, but it's hard for me not to feel at least disappointed in that it doesn't feel as witty. It
yeah,
doesn't feel like it has as much to say as the last film did, and maybe because there isn't that much to say about horror films in the last year.
Maybe.
And because, you know, maybe all that commentary, they did use all of that up in the last film. And
Sure.
so then one might question, did we need to rush into this one as quickly as we did? But yes, in the horror world, yes, of course we had to
Yes.
rush into it as quickly as we did. Otherwise, we may never see the sequel.
When
That's
the
just
iron
kind of
is
how it
hot.
works.
Yep.
You go forward, because in 6 months that iron may not exist anymore, and
Exactly.
the franchise is just anyway. But so I kind of struggle with how I feel about this film. Again, I feel better about it than you know, Halloween Kills, and certainly better than Halloween Ends.
Oh my God, yes.
But at the same point, it's like, okay, I think we've run the course on a lot of these things, and I don't know exactly how to fix what they're doing. And so I don't have an obvious answer to tell you whether or not I think the franchise is kind of come to a sudden halt again.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, again, the ending, it gets a little bit of swagger, and it kind of goes in a new direction that may be interesting. But maybe Scream never was meant to go beyond the formulaic stories.
Right.
Maybe it was never a franchise that was going to be resurrected as something different.
Fact.
You know, it might be something that just pops up every 10 years when it has something to say about the state of, you know, horror cinema. It comes
I'd be okay
in,
with that.
it says it's bit. We all nod and chuckle and enjoy that as we see, you know, a very traditional standard horror film, you know. So I just don't know that I wanted the sequel, I think. But now that I have it, I don't know how it could have worked. And I guess that's where I'm at. That's where I you know, the performances are fine. I wish the script was sharper. I wish it wasn't just a gore fest at times.
Mm-hmm.
And then shifts into this melodrama sort of thing that's just really over the top acting and kind of like, I don't know, it just didn't work necessarily for me as well as I wanted it to.
Yeah, I think the last one was still better than this one. I said, but if you're a fan, you're probably going to enjoy it. It's not a bad film.
And if you like it for the violence sake, you know, if the humor was never your favorite part of it, because there are some people who are like, yeah, I like them, but I wish it wasn't so jokey or self-referencing, or, you know,
Right.
I just want a horror movie where people get stabbed.
Right.
If that's what you want, that's
you get
mostly
that.
what you get. You get that film.
Yes.
But we have a lot of those films. And yeah, this one's done with a lot of gloss and has a higher budget than a lot of those other films. But does that make it better? I don't necessarily think so. I mean, there are things that happen in this film that I'm like, oh, I don't know. Okay. And then you just have the red herring and you leave it dangling there, and you never really resolve. A lot of the red herrings have they're like spiders. They have lots of arms.
Yep.
And they'll deal with like 3 out of the 6 arms or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but there's 3 more legs over here that you're just ignoring, but they're over here.
Yep.
They're twitching.
That's so we can exploit them later if we want.
Yeah.
Which is how we got this movie.
Sure. And they may have a bigger plan where those certain things will work in, or it might just be sloppy writing.
Could just be sloppy writing.
And generally, with the Scream series, I felt like it wasn't sloppy writing. Like, they kind of, but I don't know. I don't know. It might be sloppy writing.
So definitely I would tell horror people, again, are you're going to get out of it what you want. I think if you want the Scream stuff, you're going to get it. If you want the gore stuff, you're going to get it. A lot more gore than a lot of the previous Screams.
Yeah.
So you'll get that. The humor's not as upfront as a lot of the earlier stuff. But it's not a bad movie. But like I said, I think I enjoyed 5 more than I enjoyed.
I definitely did. I absolutely. I mean, five to me was a really because I, 4 worked, but didn't feel necessarily as relevant as I would have wanted it to. Whereas
Right.
5, like I said, 5 felt like it came the right time. It had something to say about the horror genre as it was at that point, because it had changed.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of A24 films had come out. A whole new sort of twist on horror was kind of going on that was different and had plenty of stuff that you could talk about. But yeah, I think maybe they talked about all of it. And maybe there wasn't that much left to talk about. And when you're 6 films in and you're still trying to do exactly what the first films did,
Yep.
only slightly rearranged or whatnot, maybe they've run out. Maybe without the commentary, the Scream just isn't as relevant or as interesting as I'd like it to be.
Perhaps. I don't know. Let's talk about the rest of this month. So that's this week's big release. It's going to be going up against Creed.
Yes.
It's still going to be going up against Cocaine Bear, which is a direct competitor.
Yeah.
Horror genre. Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man falls to 4 this week.
It wouldn't surprise me, and I think that's got to be a little terrifying for Marvel.
Yes.
Great opening, but no legs.
No legs.
That is not what the Marvel Universe has been known for. And so that's problematic, at least for the moment.
Right.
Because look, Black Panther 2 had legs. So this is the fact that this film doesn't, is it a sign that there is superhero fatigue? I don't know. But a lot of people saw the first one, and whatever the next film is, they'll probably see that too. But the next film's got to be better.
Mm-hmm.
It's just or it's got to feel, I don't know. This one faded a little too quickly, I think, for anyone to be comfortable with, and to be talking about it slipping down the 4th place after just a couple weeks.
I know. Well, and then let's talk about that then, because again, just this month, then next week, Shazam, is dropping. The week after that, John Wick is dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last day of the month, Dungeons and Dragons is dropping. Yeah, now, so say what you want about Dungeons and Dragons, but by the time Shazam and John Wick get done, there's no way Dungeons and Dragons does not beat Ant-Man.
I'd be shocked.
That is worrisome.
I'd be shocked if I don't know how Dungeons and Dragons is going to do. I don't know. Obviously, Stranger Things brought out a lot of the nostalgia for a lot of us. I don't know how strong the brand is right now. I'm not really connected with the tabletop community and everything, and the RPG community. Although ironically, I have been revisiting Baldur's Gate. Yeah, they did a remastered version for the PS4 that was on sale, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I like that. So anyway, I'm interested in it. I don't know what I haven't really looked at the trailers and whatnot. I didn't particularly like the last Dungeons and Dragons films.
Well, there's 2, and I think I watched the first one, and I think I'm gonna. There's a 2-pack on Amazon that's super duper cheap, and I might pick it up just to watch them before this comes, just so I can go, oh yes, this is so much better. But we've come a long way since that last one came out.
Absolutely, it's many years,
and hopefully they learned something from Warcraft.
Yeah. Oh God,
So,
Warcraft. Oh, Warcraft.
but yeah, but again, that's the next. So this week you get Scream franchise, then you get
Right.
Shazam franchise, then you get
Franchise.
John
Yeah.
Wick franchise, and then you get Dungeons and Dragons, which should just be a fun, all ages gamer nostalgia kind of film. So it should have that draw. I don't think it'll beat any of those other films at the box office, but I think it should do respectable business for what it is.
You would hope so. I mean,
Um,
you know.
but like I said, so that puts Ant-Man out of the top 5 in 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, we're gonna have to get some people on, and we're just gonna have to talk about Marvel
Well,
for a
and
whole separate episode.
and it's a radically different world because I think Cocaine Bear is available digitally next week. Um, obviously for the high price of watching it at home, but
Right.
to rent it for $20 or whatever. But there's I think Cocaine Bear knew what it was,
Yeah.
and it's totally cool with how things have played out there. Whereas Ant-Man should have done differently. I don't know. I don't know how to. And I haven't looked at the international numbers, and maybe that makes the situation a little better. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but um, I do think next week's a huge week for DC.
Shazam, yeah.
But it's a weird week for DC as well because is this we did an episode about orphaned superhero films.
I was about to say, is this the New Mutants?
Yeah,
of the DC verse. I mean, because the New Mutants got sold. It was in that death. DC wasn't sold, but
yeah, but they've changed
radically,
changing of guards.
So Shazam is now this weird. Is it going to be this weird little thing, or is it going to actually be part of whatever James Gunn is doing? We don't know yet.
And if this doesn't do incredibly well, maybe that's an easy way to end that line.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for Shazam, the franchise, they've got to do some great numbers. And they're in a different position, whereas Marvel, okay, Ant-Man fizzled a little bit. They've had a couple of the recent films that they haven't done the numbers that they wanted, but they can also point to Black Panther, which may not have been the best of the recent films, but it did financially really well. So they at least have that and know that they're building, where the story's going.
Right.
Shazam is just kind of in this place where it's like, if it's not successful, does it just go away entirely? Do we, is it essentially the Shazam universe lasted 3 films, including the Black Adam, which wouldn't even acknowledge that it was really in the Shazam interview or universe.
It is a very, very strange position that Shazam is in.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But yeah, we should probably do that. We'll have to put together a couple people and just talk about right now, because this moment for both universes is weird.
It's really weird because and radically different.
Yeah. We may have to.
But it's interesting. Because
it is.
Neither universe is in the place where I think the people in power would want them to be.
No. Fact. Who'd have thought that right now Star Wars is in the best position of the big 3?
Which doesn't, and they've gone away from theatrical. So
I know, right? Andor and Mandalorian. That's where their power is right now.
And what am I looking forward to Ahsoka? You better bet I'm
looking
forward to Ahsoka.
But we've talked about this before, the whole Disney Plus, and I know we need to wrap this up because we were supposed to be talking about Scream, but let's not forget we've addressed this on multiple levels. Disney and Marvel and Star Wars on their streaming series, again, they came in with a lot of goodwill and slow rolled their series.
Yeah.
And then backloaded them, and then eventually we said that was gonna. I said that was gonna bite them.
Yeah.
You can't keep making people wait 4, 5, 6 episodes for something good. They'll just be like, why am I bothering? Why am I bothering? And you kind of started to see that.
Which
Andor
is,
didn't do as well as it should have.
no, because I think there was some fatigue.
Right. Well, but it was constructed in a way that kind of made sense.
Well, no, I mean, I think Andor is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I know there's people who say, yeah, well, it's just kind of pedestrian and whatnot, and okay, but for me, I you know, as someone who I wonder if it's too inside baseball in the sense that they are working in a space where a lot of things are defined, and
Yep.
so there's not a lot of room to move, and if you're not familiar with that space, you may wonder why they're not moving more, I guess,
Right.
or why they're not. Why are they confined? Well, they're confined because that's just the way, the space in the story where they've placed it is confined.
Yep.
The Andor is confined, and that's probably not as interesting as like Mandalorian. We're still figuring out what that universe, that aspect of the galaxy is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do think that they jump right, that it doesn't seem as front loaded. I think that second episode that comes out jumps more into the action more quickly.
Yes.
Than a lot of the other series have.
Fact. Absolutely. It's definitely there. So a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about it. We're going to do just episodes on that kind of stuff. I swear we're gonna have to, because there's just too much to talk about. So, but this week, Scream 6.
Yeah.
Bringing it home. Yeah, no, it's good. It's fine. You'll enjoy it. Almost a little meaner, I think.
I think it's pretty vicious.
Yeah. But if that's your thing, you won't be disappointed. But it's not so vicious that you can't still enjoy it as a Scream movie. So it hasn't gone over the edge yet.
I think it's close.
It is, but it's not Halloween Kills close.
No, it hasn't.
Was over the edge.
Yeah.
Halloween Kills was over the edge. And Scream 6 is not there yet. So, again, tomorrow I've got Champions. We'll be talking about that later this week. Next week, we're literally seeing Wick, Shazam, and Dungeons and Dragons next week. And those are the next 3 weeks.
At least 2 of those. They're maybe traveling back for, unfortunately, the one I want to see the most.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which is probably Wick. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
I know. So I mentioned Evil Dead earlier. Yeah. I have to say I'm going to be in Denver for Fan Expo Denver, end of June, beginning of July. Sam Raimi is going to be there.
Oh, very nice.
So if anyone out there listening knows Sam and can give me an in, I would love to talk to Sam Raimi. I just would. There, I did it. That's my shameless plea for assistance. That's it. That's all we're going to say. That's it. We're done. We're done talking. Sam Raimi, evil. Oh, and Lee Cronin. I can't wait to see what he does with his universe. But anyway, there we go. Scream 6 this week. Go see it if you're a fan of the franchise. You'll enjoy it. Till we talk to you again, don't forget to like us, follow us on social media at VS Movie Podcast. You know how that works. Go to the website, vsmoviepodcast.com. Till we talk to you again, I'm Mark. That is Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
See you guys.
And we will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.